addition to this, funding will also be set aside to support the operations of our premier hospitality institution, which is Utalii College, to guarantee the steady supply of well-trained hospitality professionals. The tourism component of the stimulus program will also engage 5,500 community scouts under the Kenya Wildlife Service at a cost of Kenya shillings 1.
Good afternoon. Oh no, good morning to you, and thank you so much for joining us today as we look at the Africa and how the business in the continent has been affected, and we shall narrow down and look at the situation in Kenya, even as we draw comparisons with other countries across the continent, even as we struggle, to open the economies or to strategize on how to open our economies, because the economy in the continent has been greatly affected with the coming of COVID-19. And of course, different countries right now are at different stages, in terms of how they're dealing with COVID-19 and the rate at which it is the rate at which the curve is either going up or it's going down, or they've been able to bring to a place where they're able to manage the spread of COVID-19. So we are at different phases here in the continent, the different countries. So the strategies that the governments are applying are quite different. So we're going to look at the economies here in Africa and how they've been affected, and are we ready to open our economies? What are some of the risks that could come with it if you open prematurely, if you take too much time? What impact will this have on our economy? And to have this conversation with me this morning is Daniel Wesonga. Daniel, good morning.
Yes, good morning, Miriam Ogutu and our viewers across the country and also the continent of Africa.
Mm-hmm. So, of course, Africa recorded its first COVID-19 case in Egypt on 14th of February 2020. Since then, all countries have reported cases initially confined to capital cities. Cases now reported in significant number of countries and in multiple provinces and countrysides and the villages and all that. And on the 4th of May 2020, the number of confirmed cases in the continent had risen to 44,878, cost about 1,807 deaths there have been reported until 4th of May. And the African countries with the highest number of infections at the time of writing, at the time on the 4th of May, at that time was South Africa, Egypt, Morocco, and they seems to be following at each other in that manner. However, the full scope of the pandemic remains uncertain as cases are underreported and accuracy of data collection varies considerably. Now, on the 17th of April, World Health Organization warned that Africa could be the next epicenter of the coronavirus in the World Health Organization best case scenario, where governments introduce intense social distancing once a threshold of 0.2 deaths per 100,000 people per week is reached. Africa would see 122 million infections, 2.3 million hospitalizations, and 300,000 deaths. I mean, these are the statistics and the projections that were released by World Health Organization on the 17th of April. They're saying if Africa continues, perhaps social distancing is not there too, and these are the measures that have been put in place. We might see about 300,000 deaths and 2.3 million Africans hospitalized, and so. But that was on the 17th of April, so we've gone through May and we've not seen such a huge number of cases. But we've been seeing cases going up and up. Even in Kenya here, we're now reporting very huge figures compared to the first and second months when COVID-19 was first reported in the country. So is there a possibility, if things continue the way they are, we might actually reach these numbers that were issued by World Health Organizations in May and also in April?
From my point of view, I think Africa, there's been a really a slow spread of the virus in the African continent. I think those one in the scientific field and medical field can be able maybe to find the reason for that. But of course, from a layman's perspective, it's because of our people's immunity. And perhaps now that takes a departure from the earlier the earlier figures that were projected by the World Health Organization. So I'm of the opinion that perhaps we might not see the numbers rising to such extreme numbers as projected by World Health Organization. Although my plea and worry is that Africans and maybe perhaps Kenyans should not take this matter lightly. Of course, we should not loosen up the guidelines that have been set up by the government. As you see right now, Miriam, people are behaving as if the curfew has already been lifted. When you walk around, when you look around at 8 p.m., people are still walking around. People are not observing measures anymore. They're like, this thing is not meant for Africans, and there's no way we're gonna suffer its consequences. So they need to look at that. But as by my opinion, I think the numbers won't rise to such extreme as projected by the World Health Organization.
All right, and it is said that Africa is particularly susceptible because 56% of the urban population is concentrated in overcrowded and poorly serviced slum dwellings, excluding North Africa. North Africa, they seems to be doing just fine in terms of they don't have as many slums compared to some other parts of Africa, and only 34% of the households have access to basic hand washing facilities. In all, 71% of Africa's workforce is informally employed, and the most of those cannot work from home. 71%. So basically, they live from hand to mouth every day. They have to go to work, industrial area, or somewhere work. You paid your 200 shillings, 300 shillings. You go, you feed your family and yourself for the day. So you cannot afford, because I remember when the COVID-19 broke in the country, there were calls for a complete, total lockdown. South Africa almost toyed around that idea. It didn't turn well for the country. So while people were calling for the country to go on a lockdown, I think President Uhuru Kenyatta was struggling with this number of people, the over 70%, who account for the population, especially in a place like Nairobi, and who live in the slums and who cannot afford even to stock food for 2 or 3 days. So that is a challenge that the government had to deal with, even as they were considering possibilities and to put restrictions and the lockdown. And of course, looking at the situation, I think lockdown was not going to solve, was not the most effective way of solving the problem and curbing the spread of COVID-19, because with the lockdown, you would have introduced other problems, especially from that section of Kenyans who might not afford to take care of themselves if they don't go to work every day. So now then, how then can we still ensure that these measures are put in place to ensure, because right now as we speak, Kibera has really recorded high numbers. We've seen Mathare has recorded high numbers, and right now I think that is something that is keeping the government awake. Is the way they've restricted movement from and into Eastleigh. Is it possible? Can you see a scenario where that can happen in Kibra, really?
Okay, I think it will be quite cumbersome to implement same policies in places like Kibra and Mathare, because those are informal settlements. These are people who are living below the poverty line, and you might find even in a household, people you find a number like 10 people living under one roof. So really, even if you say that you're gonna restrict movement, then you'll have confined the virus amongst the people. The people gonna infect themselves amongst themselves at the restricted area. So when it comes to informal settlement, I think that is a very, very dangerous zone. And I think what the government should do is to just make sure, okay, once they restrict the area, they have to move with speed and start doing maybe door-to-door testing and being able to isolate those ones that are maybe perhaps found to have tested positive for the virus. Mm-hmm. But also, in these informal settlement areas, people get in and out. There's no any particular doorway like Eastleigh where you can be able to say, like, are we going to put security officers at this point so that we restrict movements? So in informal sector, it's a bit hectic and tricky. And I think this is a problem that many African countries are going to face when Corona finds its way in those informal sectors. So it really needs somehow the Ministry of Health as well as the national government to sit down and come up with a strategy on how they're gonna handle that situation there.
All right, so on the 24th of May, that was last month, President Uhuru Kenyatta spoke to the nation, and he hinted a possibility of opening up the country soon, because there are a lot of things that the Kenyan economy is suffering, and not just the Kenyan economy, but all economies in the world. I don't know any that is not suffering. Outside of China, I think they still have enough money to go fund World Health Organization. I think about 2 or so weeks ago, they gave World Health Organization about $2 billion US dollars after the US threatened not to continue funding there, because Trump has been very consistent, not quite consistent, because when you look at his the things he was saying earlier in the year, he was actually commending China in the manner in which they've been handling the COVID-19 until things got out of control, and he changed tunes and he said, you know what, China, you know what you were doing and you're responsible for all this mess. So he threatened, of course, he said a World Health Organization was playing PR on behalf of China, and so he said US will not be funding the World Health Organization, but China went ahead and gave World Health Organization about $2 billion US dollars, and as well they should, because it's their fault. I don't know. It's maybe there was a way they could control it, maybe not. But I think after this has settled, we'll find out. And so the plan to reopen the country was top on the agenda of the National Emergency Response to COVID-19 Committee meeting that happened on the 24th of May. And although details of the discussions were not available, the committee is chaired by Health Cabinet Secretary Mutahi Kagwe, with several cabinet secretaries as members. Now, the overall response is led by the National Coordination Committee on the response on the coronavirus pandemic. I'm reading from the Daily Nation, 25th of May last week, and they're saying, while addressing the nation on Saturday, that was on 24th of May, President Kenyatta cited global trends and said Kenya would remain under a lockdown forever. Kenya will not remain under lockdown forever. He was, however, quick to add that personal discipline is following the outlined safety measures will be required to reduce infections. Of course, Kenya cannot remain in lockdown forever. We cannot even afford, even if should we go another month of what we have right now, that will be dire. So we cannot afford that. Our economy cannot support that. Our economy cannot work under such circumstances. And President Kenyatta was looking and studying other economies, and we saw Rwanda attempted to open the country and lift some restrictions about 2 weeks ago with the social distancing and all that. And Rwandese have been, applauded to be a country that follows, heeds to the government and all that. But now what we are seeing, the cases in Rwanda have gone up. So using Rwanda as a case study, are we ready to open the restrictions and also to open our economy here in Kenya?
Yes, Miriam, I'll take it from an angle of a certain expert, an Asian expert I watched recently talking about COVID-19, and he said Corona is like your wife. First of all, you imagine that she's stubborn, and you try to find ways of containing her, but later on you realize that perhaps there's no way you can contain her in totality, and therefore you seek other ways of living and adapting to living with her. So whatever is happening right now is that we don't have a cure or a vaccine for coronavirus, and whatever the African countries need to learn now from China, from North Korea and other countries that were first ones to be affected by the virus is how to live with this virus and be able to open up the economies without really risking the lives of a majority who are working both in the informal and informal sectors. So you understand that the African economies remain informal and very vulnerable to external shocks. Right now, when you see the danger facing the African economies, we do have both exogenous effects and the endogenous effects. So, and when you look at the exogenous effects, they come from direct trade links between affected partners continents such as Asia, Europe, United States of America, which have been quite a big supporter of our tourism. And of course, that one right now has really declined. You see hotels in Mombasa have closed down. The other day I saw, was it Norfolk Hotel closing down and sending the staff at home. We also have foreign direct investment and official development assistance, which is not happening at the moment. When you come back home, we do have the endogenous effects, which occurs as a result of rapid spread of the virus in many African countries. So on one hand, they are linked to mobility and mortality, and on the other hand, they lead to a disruption of economic activities. So this may cause a decrease in domestic demand in tax revenue due to loss of oil and commodity prices, coupled with an increase in public expenditure to safeguard human health and support economic activities. So I think the president has a point there. We need to reconsider. You understand, yesterday there was a statistic that came out from the Kenya Bureau of National Statistics showing that around 700,000 Kenyans lost their jobs since March this year. So that's a very, very big number. Remember, these are breadwinners for majority of families, and most people are depending on them. So that has a very big impact on the economy. So I think from my perspective is that we need to open up the economy, but nonetheless, we also have to put measures in place to ensure that although we are opening the economy, we shall not risk our own lives. Because remember, Miriam, when you lose your life, you can never be resurrected back to life again. But when the economy collapses,
yes,
it can be brought back to life.
All right, we've seen that happen even after dire recessions across the globe. So life, yes, I think right now is very important. And you've mentioned there the current statistics, because up to the 24th of May, about 500,000 jobs had been lost so far. So now we've seen an increase from what you're mentioning there, the statistics. Now the head of state, according to sources, seemed to have been encouraged by the country's seemingly low death rate of COVID-19. At that time, when President Uhuru Kenyatta had hinted in the opening up of our economy, we had only recorded 50 deaths. But as you speak right now, I was shocked to learn now we stand at 71 deaths. Just the other day, last week, we were at 51, 50, 51, 52. Now 20 people more have died from COVID-19. So is this reason enough to tell the president perhaps we are now ready to open up the country?
Okay, I think Kenya is faced. Not only Kenya but Africa is faced by a double-sided problem, and going around it, solve it, it will require a lot of strategy and maybe cool intellect. People have to sit down. Experts have to re-examine the situation and be able to give the way forward. You know, in European countries, Asian countries, the majority of them, the economies were quite good, and you saw even in the United States of America, President Trump was giving people some relief funds to keep them moving during the pandemic. But you know, in Africa, that's a very, very foreign maybe thing to happen, because you understand our governments are still grappling with external loans that run into trillions of shillings. So it's really difficult to keep the situation, to contain the situation in Africa. And that's why maybe I think if they can do partial opening up of the country, of the economy, then perhaps it will be okay. But complete opening up of the economy, it might spell a disaster, because you've given there a case study of Rwanda, where cases once more have spiked up once they opened up. They tried to open up. We had a case of South Korea, which had reported 0 infections. But at the moment they try to open up life for people to move around to schools to resume, then the cases again are mushroomed. So it's really, really a delicate matter. And in Africa, we need to do more extra homework in terms of planning, in terms of strategy, in terms of looking at maybe the repercussion it might have on the other side in terms of the economy, not only how it's going to affect the people's lives and their health. So we also have to check on the economy. That's why I advocate for, we need to have a middle ground.
All right. So we've seen, of course, the schools were supposed to be opening, but they have been pushed to September. And I'm sure if we get to September and the numbers are not very good, I'm sure the government, in its wisdom, will push forward, the reopening of schools, even just scrapping off what has been learned this year, and for our the students and the pupils in this country to start again coming next year, God willing, because I think at this point life is what is important. We have established that. But also participation of the citizens is very important. Should the country win this war against COVID-19, and we've seen the laxity among Kenyans, they're not really very keen in following these rules and measures. The hand washing is not there as much in public places. Sanitizers are there or not? Like nobody, like we become very complacent. It's like COVID is here, it is here with us, and so what? But the problem is this, if things continue the way they are, it might overwhelm our health system, which is already having its own challenges. And so citizens have been designated as wardens for their neighborhoods, and are responsible for checking in on neighbors to ensure their well-being and all of that. And you're told if you suspect somebody has come in your neighborhood and was not there, and is coming from a place where, it's restricted, then you're supposed to report and all of that. But even as we look at in opening our economy, an early opening, will the government be courting a disaster?
Yes, Miriam, when you look at most research papers.
All right, we seem to be having. Can you hear me? We seem to be having there a problem with the signal, the network there from Daniel. Daniel, we have a problem with your network there as he works on that. While other countries are opening up their economies, the Medic said it is not yet the right time for Kenya to do so, since we are not aware of what lies in front of us, and we have not flattened the curve and not yet reached the peak. And Dr. Patrick Oyaro here was quoted as saying, by opening the economy, the government is loosening stay-at-home orders, yet Kenyans are very poor at following the measures, and even putting on a mask in public places is a problem to many, said Dr. Patrick Oyaro. So they're saying, we could open our economy, but the risk that come with that, the disaster that might come with that is far more high compared to just keeping the restrictions as it is right now. So the doctor also said the question that the government should be grappling with before making any move is whether the nation will adhere to the guidelines, and if the government can minimize the damage. And so that is that. So recently, President Uhuru Kenyatta unveiled a 53.7 billion Kenya shillings stimulus package to boost the economy that is already reeling from the harsh effects of COVID-19. I think we were cautioned, after COVID-19 was first reported in the country. 2 weeks later, the president, I think, met with the players in the industries, in the financial industries, different bank managers, the CBK, the Central Bank of Kenya, head there, and they had a meeting, and they were cautioned, and we were told Kenyans should be prepared for hard times ahead, because as it is, there was not telling when the economy will be back on. So President Uhuru Kenyatta, of course, having hinted the possibility of reopening the economy, as he released an 53.7 billion Kenya shillings economic stimulus program to cushion Kenyans against effects of COVID-19. And this, effects, there were eight sectors of the economy, namely infrastructure, education, health, medium and small enterprises, agriculture, tourism, environment, and manufacturing. And these are sectors that have been greatly affected by COVID-19. I can't even begin to tell you how much our hospitality industry has been affected. And we've seen, we walk around the CBD right now, and I see a lot of restaurants are beginning to, open up slowly, but Kenyans are a bit hesitant to go in there and enjoy a meal, because people are just, the paranoia. So it will take a while before things come back to normal, even before those establishments are able to really go back into full business there. Because as it is, they can't even accommodate, they can't have as many people as possible in those establishments. So it's very interesting there. So this 53.7 billion Kenya shillings allocation fund, let me just read through it. And I think we were playing that clip before you came on, and some of the things that President Uhuru Kenyatta did to ensure that even as we continue to struggle and try to, make the best of this very challenging situation, the Kenyan economy could still, be moving, maybe not as robust, but also some Kenyans could benefit and be cushioned. And so President Uhuru Kenyatta allocated 600 million Kenya shillings to manufacturing sector to buy locally manufactured vehicles. Okay, I don't know who is buying a vehicle right now, but maybe a few of us are buying vehicles right now. And so this has been, and I think the reason why this was allocated for the locally manufactured vehicles is because there are people, the local labor that work in such farms will go a long way in ensuring, nobody will be retrenched. People will keep their jobs if the money is there. And we see that will go along in ensuring no more Kenyans who will lose their jobs. As we have seen there, over 500,000 people have lost their job since the coming of COVID-19 in this country. So I think allocation of that 600 million Kenya shillings in the manufacturing sector to buy locally manufactured vehicles will ensure those Kenyans continue to keep their jobs, even as we wait to see how the situation pans out. And also that will go ahead and boost our local manufacturing industries, which I think is very important. And this is the backbone of this, economy and in the manufacturing industry, because they are the drivers of the economy. We call them the Juakali sector, and also manufacturing forms part of President Uhuru Kenyatta's big four agendas, and one of them is manufacturing, because it is important when you empower the people from down there, and then they're able to build up the economy. We have a strong foundation in a country when people down there are empowered. So it's very important, and so it's one of the drivers into a robust economy. And so it's very important this money was allocated to that sector, and so I'm sure that will ensure that our the local labor there will continue even as we deal with this COVID-19. And also 3 billion Kenya shillings was allocated for agriculture sector to acquire and supply farm inputs. And now we know the problem that we've been having in the agriculture sector. And I think as a Kenyan here, I've not been very excited when I hear our CS for agriculture come out and say, what, Kenya, we don't have food. And I'm sitting here thinking, what do you mean we don't have food? Because we are supposed to have food. We are supposed to be able to be feeding ourselves. We have the best weather. We have the best, soil in this country. We have a lot of places that are very fertile across the country. And so there's no reason as to why Kenya in the 21st century should not be able to feed itself. And, food security is one of the things that forms part also of a big four agenda. President Uhuru Kenyatta is working to ensure by the time he leaves office, Kenya should be food sufficient. We should not be like, South Sudan can receive food relief, because we know South Sudan has been in war for a long time. Somalia has been experiencing unrest there for quite a while, so they can't farm. They've not been able to do that. But Kenya, no, we should not be. When South Sudan is receiving help, Kenya shouldn't, and Kenya has not been receiving any help in terms of food like that. But when our minister, our CS for agriculture came out and said, we may not be having food. We don't have enough food in our reservoirs. I said, what? And then we have a problem there, because we should put the right people in a sector like agriculture to ensure Kenyans produce, because Kenyans can produce. We have farmers, we have people who farm to feed, and one part of this country is known as the breadbasket of this country. So this monies that the government has put in place, the 3 billion Kenya shillings for agriculture sector to acquire and supply farm inputs, can we go now and empower those farmers to ensure that Kenyans farmers, first of all, are protected, Kenyan farmers are supported, and then when we protect and support them adequately, they'll be able to feed the rest of us who are here, in the cities, and who depend on, the produce there. So I think while the government gave out this money, we've known the sector of agriculture has had a lot of corruption and a lot of cartels there that have gone to have worked to the disadvantage of the hardworking Kenyan farmers in this country. So when I hear we're bringing maize from I don't know where, I'm thinking, come on, we have enough maize from a part of this country over the western part and over there that can actually feed the rest of us who have this. So I think this is something that President Uhuru Kenyatta, even as he continue pumping more money into this sector, which I think is important and is laudable. But can we do follow-ups and ensure that the farmers that are meant to benefit from this actually get to benefit, and it does not go to the pockets of a few individuals, a few cartels, a few thieves who steal and who shortchange these farmers who are supposed to be benefiting. So I think the 3 billion will go a long way in supporting the Kenyan farmer. I live to see. I hope I'll see a time where, food security will not even something that you're discussing, because as a Kenyan, I have full confidence that we can feed ourselves, that Kenyans should not be sleeping hungry because the country is able. We are blessed with a fertile country. We are blessed with beautiful weather. We can feed ourselves. So we just need the right people, President Uhuru Kenyatta. We just need the right people in these places, and then we shall all be fed in this country, all right? Okay, so the 3 billion Kenya shillings are there. President Uhuru Kenyatta, while unveiling his 53.6 billion economic stimulus package there, he gave to the agriculture sector. And also on the same token, he gave 6.5 billion Kenya shillings. This was allocated to the Ministry of Education to hire 10,000 teachers and 1,000 ICT interns. We know that our education has been greatly sector has been greatly affected, especially the public education there, because the private schools are able to continue with their education. At least they're able to keep the students busy there, but in the public schools it has been a challenge because when an ICT matters and things like that. So by hiring over 1,000 interns, that one that will decrease the rate of unemployment, not as much, but at least not significant, but at least a few more young Kenyans will get employed as ICT interns here, and also 10,000 teachers will be hired, and I think the process is ongoing. That's a lot, and I think that is really commendable because there's so many teachers who graduated from college years back who have not had an opportunity to get employment. So I think this is commendable, and we'll have more people join, more teachers, especially for our public schools, because there has been a challenge of understaffing. So this will go a long way in solving partly unemployment and also ensuring our children who attend public schools actually have enough teaching staff there. So that is very good, and I'm hoping these things are already happening as we speak, because this was unveiled on the 23rd of May. So I'm sure some heads are rolling to ensure this happens very, very soon. And also 10 billion Kenya shillings for payment of outstanding VAT refunds and other pending bills for small and medium enterprises, and 3 billion Kenya shillings seed capital through the SME and credit guarantee scheme. So, of course, the businesses, the small-scale businesses and medium, small-scale and medium-scale businesses have really suffered, and a lot of them have closed down as we speak because of the effects of COVID-19. And so this will go a long way in ensuring that they get a bit of a capital boost there to ensure their doors open, because when a lot of them employ a lot of Kenyans. Now you understand why we have a huge number of people who have lost their jobs since I think March there, because a lot of these small scale businesses and medium, some of them have closed shops, and that means people have lost their jobs. So in this regard, it will help in keeping the doors open and just keeping the economy going, even as we wait to see how the country when we shall flatten the curve of COVID-19 there. And 250 million Kenya shillings disbursed to vulnerable persons through mobile phones, through mobile money. And I heard that clip that was playing there earlier, and people are wondering, why is this money? And I've heard, a lot of Kenyans have received this money, and that the government started giving, I think, for 2 months now, it has been the government has been dispersing this money, because initially what President Uhuru Kenyatta was saying, they used to contract a few people, give them money to buy the food stuff and go issue to Kenyans who really needed it. But what was happening is they never bought this food. People stole this money. So the government decided, okay, fine. Perhaps the best way we need is the chiefs to identify the people who are in need, and the local leadership to identify the people who are in need and have them register them and submit their names. And so a lot of Kenyans have been receiving this money. And so President Uhuru Kenyatta is saying, you know what, with this, doing this in that manner ensures that the people who are supposed to receive this kind of help, they're receiving it. It is guaranteed. And we've seen a lot of Kenyans coming out and saying, you know what, as much as it might not be as much, but that 2,000 shillings actually, has really helped me with not eating for the last 2 days, with not eating for the last a day or so, and this one has gone a long way in easing up and helping out Kenyans who have been, have suffered during this period of time. So even as we speak in Africa in general, as I conclude, and then we can come back with the diaspora dispatches, the impact on African economies could be this slowing of growth to 1.8%, the effect of COVID-19 on the African economy, 1.8% in the best case scenario on a contraction of 2.6% in the worst case. This has the potential to push 27 million people into extreme poverty, as if we don't have enough poverty in Africa. So should this trend continue, that is what we are looking at. Even as the spread of COVID-19 is suppressed in Africa, its economic damage will be unavoidable. And the price of oil, which a few African countries produce oil, which accounts to 40% of Africa's export, has halved, and major African exports such as textile and fresh cut flowers have crashed. We have seen that even in the country here. The flower industry have suffered because there are no planes going out to Europe, and a lot of our flowers are exported in the Western world. And so tourism, which accounts for up to 38% of the gross domestic product, that is the GDP of some African countries, has effectively halted, as the airline industry that supports it, and collapsed businesses may never recover. And that is a very other sad possibility that we are staring at. Without a rapid response, governments risk losing control and facing unrest. All right, like what we're seeing now in the United States. These are people who are already going through a very difficult time. So, George Floyd, killing, was just, the country was already on edge. So that was just, it just needed something to tip it off. And now we're seeing what is happening. Then they're saying it, and we've seen the number of unrest happening across different countries in the world. And so to protect and build towards our shared prosperity, at least $100 billion US is needed to immediately resource health and social safety net in Africa as a response. And another $100 billion US is critical for economic emergency stimulus, including a debt standstill and financing of a special purpose vehicle for commercial debt, obligations, and provision of extra liquidity for the private sector. So that is what we're being told there. So anyway, the coronavirus pandemic is currently causing significant adverse impact on the global economy, with the governments around the world implementing various fiscal measures to mitigate its effect and provide relief for businesses and households. Within Africa, the impacts of COVID-19 are being felt in different ways, and the measures taken by the respective governments have also differed on the areas of focus and comprehensiveness. So this is a report I was just looking at by Deloitte in Africa, and they're saying Africa is projected a GDP growth of 3.2% of 2020 is now expected to fall to a negative 0.8%. This is due to enforced partial or total lockdown of economies brought on by the pandemic. Now, the outbreak has led to disruption in the various sectors, most notably the financial industry and the tourism and hospitality sectors. And I think we've talked about that before and even just now. And so they're saying the implications on, on social economic situation in Africa. And they're saying although the numbers of COVID-19 cases and fatalities might still appear comparatively low in Africa than in other world regions, the looming health shock of COVID-19 could have disastrous impacts on the continent's already strained health systems and could quickly turn into a socio-economic emergency beyond health risks. The COVID-19 shock to African economies is coming in 3 waves, so pay attention. This is according to Deloitte, and then I shall wrap up and we go to the next show. Number 1, lower trade and investment from China in the immediate term. And we've seen that. Number 2, a demand slump associated with the lockdowns in the European Union and OECD countries. And 3, a continental supply shock affecting domestic and intra-Africa trade. It is shaking commodity-driven growth models that had largely failed to create more and better jobs or improved well-being. On the health front, greater capacities to test, protect, treat, and cure are essential. So that is according to the Deloitte, some survey and the report they did just a few days ago. So thank you so much. This has been Africa Business, and we've been looking at the impact of COVID-19 on the economies of Africa with special attention to Kenya. So I'll just take a break and then we shall come back with Africa Diaspora Dispatches. Thank you so much. My name is Rema Gutu. Don't go too far. Diaspora Dispatches will be back the other side of the break.